right, welcome guys to the Andrew and Ian show. No longer the Mike and Andrew show, but the Andrew and Ian show. Ian High has stepped in here to take the place of Mike Meredith, of course. Ian, how you doing this evening, man?
Uh, Better than I was before I looked at the Tigers score. So it was 6-0, now it's 7-7. So good, pretty good. Can't complain.
Yeah, amen to that. And at some point in this new version of the show, we got to talk about this Tigers, but not today. Last week, obviously, we didn't have an episode. We were going to talk NHL draft plus NHL free agency, but some things came up on Tuesday, and then I was on vacation on Thursday last week, so we never got together to get an episode out. But we're back today, and we're going to talk NHL draft and NHL free agency because, man, it's been wild this postseason so far, especially when it comes to free agency, and we'll get to that. But first, we're going to talk about the NHL draft. Um, San Jose, I think San Jose actually did a really, really good job in the draft. Obviously, they take the best player in this draft class and Macklin Celebrini at number one, but that's not what I'm really talking about. We all knew he was going to go number one. Best two-way forward in the draft. Best forward in the draft, quite frankly. Um, and he's going to be a very, very good piece to help this San Jose rebuild come together. But what they did at pick number 11, I think, they did a really, really good job. They traded up. They had pick number 14. They traded up with Buffalo to get to pick number 11, where they drafted Sam Dickinson. Good, really, really good defenseman in the draft. He's probably the third best defenseman in this draft. Um, he was ranked number 7 by the Central Scouting in terms of skaters, so they got a bit of a deal there on him. But that I think he's going to help propel this rebuild going forward. He's not NHL ready just yet. Give him a year or two though, and he's definitely going to be a starter there in San Jose. They did a really, really good job though. Chicago, they got the second place prize in this game. Or not in this game, in this draft, drafting Artyom Levshunov from Michigan State, best defenseman in the class. There was a lot of talk pre-draft. At first, it was going to be Demidov going to Chicago, and then it was Levshunov, and it kept flipping back and forth. But ultimately, Chicago took Levshunov. And I think that was the right choice for them. They need some help on that blue line. He's definitely NHL ready, in my opinion. He's probably going to sit a year back, play in the AHL this year, and then move on up next year. I just think they might want to have him adjust a little bit more to the American or the North American style of hockey. So probably getting him into the AHL system would be probably best here. And then in this draft, man, I don't know if you noticed, but there was a lot of reaching going on in this draft, and I don't know if you noticed that at all, or if you even watched the draft. But you got any thoughts on that, real quick?
As I say, as I'm just going over the brief recap, even looking at Anaheim, the third pick in the draft already, NHL Central Scouting ranking, number 13 of North American skaters, went number 3 overall.
Yeah,
You're talking about reaches.
yeah, and that was the first of many reaches in this draft too. I mean, granted, yeah, Beckett Senek, he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he was ranked number 13 for a reason. If you're ranked in that top 32, I think you're a really good player. I mean, that's just kind of the way it goes. But they reached for him. They could have drafted Demidov, but they didn't. And yeah, they take him at number 3. Personally, if I was Anaheim, I would have traded back from number 3 if this is the route you wanted to go. But they get a pretty good player. He's got a pretty decent shot. But he's gonna be a few years for Anaheim, and that's okay. I mean, with the way Anaheim's rebuild has gone, it's it's frustrating to see how Anaheim's rebuild has actually gone, just based on the development that they're lacking, and going for a reach here at number 3 was a huge mistake in my opinion.
Yeah, that's at number 3. They're kind of in San Jose's position. You know, it's top 3 pick. You really want to get a player that will change your franchise and have an immediate impact with your franchise. And yeah, that's exactly what the Ducks didn't do with that pick.
Right.
Good on
They
them for bringing the uniforms back, but
Oh yes,
waste of a
absolutely.
pick.
It was a waste of a pick. It was a waste of an opportunity to trade back. But Montreal ended up drafting Ivan Demidov, and I think Montreal probably won the draft, at least in terms of the first round. They had a really really good first round, getting Ivan Demidov, and then who did they take later in the first round? I can't remember off the top of my head here. Oh, they took Michael Haig, who had one of the best shots. He was ranked number 10 in North American skaters. Great shot on this kid. So I think Montreal did an excellent job in this draft. They drafted an NHL ready skater in Ivan Demidov, and then they follow that up with one of the best shots in this entire draft in Michael Haig. Um, really great job from Montreal there. To get two top 10 prospects at number 5 and number 21 in this draft. One surprise for me was the Islanders got a nice steal here with taking Cole Eiserman at number 20. He's ranked number 12. I think he's a top 10 player in this draft. I mean, he has, bar none, the best shot in the draft. I mean, he's a better shooter than Macklin Celebrini is. He sucks in the defensive zone, though. He really needs to develop that part of his game. And I think that might be part of why he dropped so far in the draft, because a lot of people still had him at a being drafted around number 8 and number 13 in their mock drafts, but he fell all the way down to number 20.
Yeah, I mean, like you just said, you think he's a top 10 like overall pick, and dropping to 20 that's dropping 10 picks. That's pretty significant. So that'd be a hell of a steal.
Yeah, and Vegas got a great steal too, drafting Trevor Connolly, another elite shot, better in the defensive zone than Cole Eiserman. He was ranked number 6 amongst North American skaters. However, he's got some stuff off ice that has been issues with him in the past, and that's probably mostly why his draft stock fell. Is all those off ice issues that he has, but he's still a really good player, and that's going to help Vegas a lot going forward. But Vegas needs to figure out a lot of other things with the cap situation first. But yeah, St. Louis did a pretty decent job with taking Adam Jernick. I think he's probably somewhere. He's ranked number 4 in terms of international skaters. He's about he's a fringe top 20 pick, I think, in this draft. So they did a pretty decent job there. Detroit, though. Very interesting pick here. They took Michael Brandsegg-Nygaard, and yes, I know it sounds like a bad word at the end of his last name, but it's not that. Ranked number 5 in terms of international skaters. He has a really good shot. He's a fringe top 25 prospect, I think. Me personally, I wanted Cole Eiserman. I really, when I saw he was still available at number 15, I was like, please him. He's a second line forward at the very best, I think. I mean, the Wings, they need so much help at the forward positions, but drafting a number 2 guy, not really. I mean, at number 15, you're not going to get a number 1, forward or number 1 defenseman, but still, you have to you have to try and make a move I would have personally loved to see either Cole Eiserman or Detroit make a move to move up into the top 10 of this draft, because I think that would have really helped this rebuild along, because we have a lot of good talent. We don't have any elite talent in our system, and I don't really care for that. But that said, Michael Brandstad Nygaard, first ever Norwegian player to be drafted in the first round. So I mean, some history made there. Yeah, he has a really really long last name. It like wraps halfway around the jersey. I don't know if you saw that or not.
No, I haven't, but that's really funny.
Oh my god, it is hilarious. Like they showed like a video of him seeing hugging his family after he got drafted and whatever, and he's wearing the jersey, and it's like halfway around the jersey it's wrapped around. It is insane. The Red Wings love guys with really long last names and guys who played in Swedish leagues, and they get who they get, but yeah, it was just very very interesting. Philadelphia, they had a reach in the draft. Minnesota had a pretty decent reach. I mean, Bouillon was I wouldn't say reach necessarily, but he wasn't necessarily I guess super high up on everyone's draft board. And they took him at 12, but yeah, outside of that, not a whole lot of crazy picks, I guess. Nashville took a guy who's like ranked number 22 in international skaters. Wasn't even a first round prospect. They took him at 22, so that was a pretty big reach, taking Igor Surin. But yeah, just very very interesting draft. Utah took Cole Bowden, again a guy who didn't have a first round draft grade, at number 24. And Boston even took a reach, and at number 25. So it was very interesting, because especially like in the later rounds, you saw a lot of guys that didn't have first round grades, or even was mocked to go in the first round, going in the first round. So it was very very interesting. A lot of guys dropping as well, but yeah, just a very very weird NHL draft this year, but should be interesting. Especially, I think the big winners from the draft, obviously San Jose, but I also think Montreal, probably with the two best picks in the entire draft.
Yeah, I would agree. Montreal did a really good job there. They had, like you said, two really good. I mean, taking a top 10 in a North American skater at number 21 it's a pretty significant jump there.
Yeah, and a easy top 15 player at 21 as well, and then taking the second best forward in the draft, at number 5. Yeah, very very good job. And then San Jose, like I said, obviously when you take a guy like Macklin Celebrini, it's not really winning the draft. But what they did at number 11 to move up and take probably the third or fourth best defenseman in the entire draft, very, very good job from San Jose. But yeah, so let's get into some free agency here, man. I know you got some signings you want to talk about, so let's get right into it.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and let's start with the elephant in the room. Start with Toronto, man. Start getting into some of these bigger names moving around. So like Oliver Ekman-Larsson. That was one I was kind of shocked to see him leave Florida.
Yeah, I mean, I thought, he might take another year at Florida. I know Florida only signed him to a 1-year deal, but yeah, I was surprised, because he was a big part of helping them win the cup this year. He's a great part on that power play for them. I thought for sure Florida would try to keep him, but Florida lost a lot this year, and we need to talk about that in a bit. But Toronto did a good job signing him. What was it, a 1-year deal or was it a 2-year deal?
For OEL, they got him to a 4-year deal
Oh, holy shit!
per year. Yeah, so something in Toronto got him to sign more than 4 times or 4 times as long as he was in Florida.
Yeah, I mean, look, Toronto, good for them for getting a good defenseman, and by good I mean offensively good. Um, but here's something that you got to realize with Toronto, or Toronto has to realize, is that you can't really win much in the playoffs if all you're focused on is scoring goals, and that's what this signing really was just putting up more points. You got to have some guys that play defense, and the other thing too is Toronto's so cap bound. I mean, obviously with that core four, taking up 50% of the cap. When you have four players taking up over half your cap, you have some problems, and they spent a ton to get OEL there.
Yeah, and then they also signed Chris Tanev to a 6-year, 27 mil contract. He said its average annual value of 4.5 mil.
Yeah.
So there's even more
yeah.
gone.
More gone. Tanev, great help defensively for them, not so much offensively, and that kind of balances out with Ekman Larson. But yeah, man, they're paying out the ass for guys that, I get it because of the taxes in Canada, especially. It's hard to get players to sign, so you have to overpay guys. And that's probably why Ekman Larson and Tanev both signed theirs, because Toronto just said, fuck it, let's spend all this money to at least try and get you there, because anywhere else, like in the United States, you're going to be paying less taxes, so teams aren't going to offer you as much, and there you go. But Toronto's so cash-strapped now, and their roster's not necessarily better either this year.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it, Tanev's 34. They signed him to 6 years. He's going to be 40 by the time that contract's up.
And you can't move that contract either. There's no team willing to trade for him, at least in terms of contending teams.
Yeah, that's it's interesting because they gave OEL, who's 32, a 4-year contract. So you'd think at least they would swap the years around, maybe be willing to pay the younger defenseman for longer. You'd think, but it's just interesting to see.
You would think, but like, man, I don't know what Toronto's doing, man. I get their vision, trying to just put up more points, but at the same time, man, you need guys to play defense, but you're also overpaying out the ass. Like, next year, they have to move one of those core four, and it's obviously not going to be Matthews or Tavares. It's more than likely going to be Marner next year, but who's going to trade for him is the real question, because like Toronto has to trade one of those four out. They have to. The question is who, and then who's going to be stupid enough to try and get Marner?
Does a cup-hungry Edmonton maybe take a shot at it?
Maybe.
They have McDavid and Draisaitl.
Right, and they're paying them out the ass too. They don't want to add another $10 million contract onto that, That's their issue. And that's the issue with trying to trade Marner at all, is that that's a $10 million cap hit, and I don't think really any team wants to pay that, especially any contenders right now that are already paying guys $8+ million a year. Multiple guys at $8+ million a year.
Don't think they're going to talk him down either. So it's more a matter of who is going to take that. And like you said, I don't believe anyone will take that for them. But that's in a year. So Godspeed, Toronto.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to let him walk, I think. I don't think Toronto's going to get anything for him. They're going to have to let him walk. But yeah, Toronto, very interesting offseason so far. Again, they're paying out the ass, overpaying, especially Chris Tanev. OEL, a little bit overpay there, but yeah, and that's a common theme this free agency in the NHL is a lot of overpaying.
Yeah, that's a very common sign, like you said. Uh, it's a big one.
How about Stamkos in Nashville?
Yeah, that I was gonna say that's they had a few of them that were like, holy hell! Like Stamkos moving out of Tampa, that was kind of predicted. Now he's in Nashville, and he came with Marchessault and Skye. It's like that's a hell of a haul.
Yeah,
And they paid
Barry Trotz is trying to get a cup in Nashville before he dies, man. That is for sure. He's trying to get a cup in that franchise before he fucking dies, and this is a huge push from him.
Oh yeah, 100%. It sucks they couldn't do it when Pecorino was still playing. But, like you said, overpaying, like signed Stamkos, 34-year-old to a 4-year deal, $32 million contract, $8 million. So like you said, if you want to be a contender, you're already paying how many guys, you know, 8 to 10 mil. You just took on, if you're Nashville, another one. Granted, Stamkos isn't a bad player. We all know that. We all know the caliber that he was playing at in Tampa. And I, as a Red Wings and Sharks fan, didn't like him for that, and I'll admit that. But I think it's kind of an overpay. Are you going to get that same production fitting him into this offense?
Right, and look, he had 40 goals last year, so obviously the production is still there from him. I mean, I think he had over 82 points this year. I think it was well over 80 or point per game
He had
pace this year.
81, so
Oh, he
he
had
was
81,
1
so
point
just
off
1 point
by
off. Yeah.
point per game.
So
Which still,
yeah,
really
that's
good
pretty
for a
good.
goalie. That's pretty
Exactly,
damn good.
exactly. But he was so Tampa offered him, I think it was 8 years, $3 million a year. He said it wasn't term, it was money. He wanted about $4 to $5 million a year. Nashville paid him $8 million a year. $8 million fucking dollars for an aging vet. Obviously his production has slowed over the last few years, but still put up 40 goals last year. So can they get that level of production from him again? But I want to know what other offers were out there for him to the point where Nashville was paying $8 million a year for him to go and sign there. That's what I want to know is what other offers were out there. We don't know, but we need. I really want to. I really hope some team comes out saying, "Yeah, we offered Stamkos this much, and Nashville outbid us."
Because yeah, if he wanted 4 to 5, and they got him with 8 a year, some team had to have offered him 6 to 7, and he was like, maybe. And then they were like, we'll get you here with 8.
Yeah, I think there was definitely a bidding war that we didn't get to see. And then the Marchessault, they overpaid him too.
Yep, that's another $5.5 million a year cap hit for 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, huge overpay for him. I mean, he's worth maybe at the most $4 million. They're giving him $1.5 million more than what his market value's at. Man, it's
And
been
he had 42 goals this past year, so they signed
right,
40 goal scorers.
right.
But by the time these contracts are up, they're both going to be 38, so they're going to be old. And who's going to pick them up, really?
Right, they're untradeable contracts. Maybe you can trade Marchessault at some point, but you're not trading that Stamkos contract.
No, not at all.
Not at an $8 million cap hit for an aging vet. The Marchessault one, you can maybe move that, but you're gonna have to move that in like year 3 or year 4 of this deal, just because that's a lot of cap space for a guy who's aging. And yes, he did put up 40 goals, but that was with Vegas, who put up a ton of goals this year in general. So, and that's the thing with Stamkos too, is like, are you going to get the same level of production from these guys? I don't know. They might not. It depends on how they fit within that Nashville system. I think they'll fit well. I don't know if you'll get 40 goals from each of them again, but it's going to be interesting. Those lines also for Nashville are going to be really, really messed up. You're going to have first line guys on your second line next year, and that's the crazy part about it as well.
Yeah, and then signing Brady Skaggs from Carolina, and that's a 7-year, $7 million cap hit. So that's just $1 million less for almost double the amount of time you're paying Stamkos. Granted, they needed help on the back end, so that really helped short things up. Again, that's it's a hefty contract that you're paying for 7 years.
Yeah,
It's not going to come back to bite them in the ass. If
I
it does,
it might. It might. Ottawa had a pretty good offseason so far. I mean, they traded. I forget what they traded. Do you want to pull up that trade real quick to get Linus Ullmark from Boston? Because that was a very um, interesting trade. I remember that, but very very good move for Ottawa. Even though I fucking hate Ottawa, I hate their fans. They're one of the most toxic fan bases in all of sports, quite frankly. But I mean, I guess you become toxic when you're always irrelevant, anyways. But you know, um, but I like that trade for Ottawa. It instantly makes them a a wild card contender. I think.
yeah, I mean, anytime you can steal a goalie from a goalie tandem like Boston had, that's bar none an upgrade, especially for a team like Ottawa. But considering all they did was, so they got Olmark from Boston in exchange for their 2024 first round draft pick, forward Mark Kastelik, and goaltender Jonas Korpisalo. And they retained 25% of Korpisalo's remaining salary. So for a Vezina winning goalie, you, you pretty much, I mean, you gave away a first for a Vezina winning goalie.
Yeah, and
Pretty damn good
that's not a bad trade. I think he's 28 or 29 years old. So he's getting up there in age, but he's still performing at an elite level, and it's definitely going to help Ottawa. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Now, granted, Boston had a lot better defense than what Ottawa did last year, and that helps Allmark's numbers, and obviously that helps Swayman's numbers too, over there in Boston. So it's going to be interesting to see how he performs this year with Ottawa, just considering that he doesn't have that blue line in front of him anymore to protect him as much. But yeah, another signing I want to talk about is, and it might be the only contract probably that isn't an overpay in the entire free agency so far, is Toivo Teravainen to Chicago. Very good deal there. I think it was. I know it's a 3-year deal. I can't remember if it was a $3.5 or $4.5 million contract. You want to pull?
It's a 3-year, 16.2 mil.
Okay, so
average annual value.
Yeah.
1.4 million.
Yeah. So yeah, that is not a bad signing. That is not a bad signing.
A franchise like Chicago, who is in they need to get
Right.
good players now, getting a former draft pick from theirs back, I'd say that's a really damn good job for them.
Not only that, but like what Chicago's doing with their rebuild is actually really really smart, and I wish Detroit did it last year. And that's signing veteran players that actually have leadership skills. Looking at you, Patrick Kane, and because Patrick Kane has no fucking leadership skills at all. But getting veteran players in that have leadership skills like Teravainen does, and getting your young guys in, to learn from these vets that have, these leadership skills that can actually teach these guys how to play at the NHL level, you develop these guys much quicker. Detroit didn't do that last year, and so I think Detroit's going to take a huge step back just because of the fact that we're bringing up a whole bunch of rookies this year, and they don't have anyone to learn from, no vets to learn from, because Edmonton's going to be up this year. Who's he going to learn from? Fucking Ben Sherratt and Jeff Petrie? Fuck no.
You want him to learn from Moritz Seider, who's you're re-signing him this year off his rookie deal?
Right. Yeah,
I wouldn't necessarily call
that's
him
not. No, he's not a vet. He's still a young player that he's still developing too. And then like Jonathan Berggren's expected to be up this year. The only guy he's going to be able to learn from is Dylan Larkin. I mean, you could probably learn from Tarasenko now that the Wings signed him, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if Patrick Kane's not going to fucking be able to teach him anything, and no one else on this roster is good enough except for Larkin to teach these young guys, to teach these young forwards how to do anything. So, man, it's just what Chicago's doing is the correct way to do a rebuild. Is what I'm trying to get at. Like they're bringing in veterans while also pulling up their young guys to learn from, and they're signing veterans to shorter term deals, like Teravainen on a 3-year deal. That gives them plenty of time to help develop these kids, and then they can use them as trade fodder later when these younger guys are ready to take that next step, and Chicago's ready to be competitive again.
Exactly. That's how rebuilds should be. But, some franchises just choose not to.
Yeah, and let's get into the Red Wings and their free agency because, oh boy, oh boy, do we have to talk about that.
You like goalies?
Oh yeah, Steve Yzerman loves his backup goalies. He loves his backup goalies.
You signed Captain Talbot while still having
I don't mind the Talbot signing. I don't mind it.
Lyons.
Yes, and
You still have two goalies. You're not running three goalies.
he
So you
said,
signed a third goalie.
and he said that we're not going to carry 3 goalies. Well, that was a fucking lie. Because I mean, in my opinion, I think we keep Husso down in the AHL till he can prove he can be healthy for a full season. Like he's never been healthy for a full season, and that's a big issue for me. Now Cam Talbot had a good year. I think he was a 913 this past year with LA, playing 50 some odd games. That said, LA had one of the best defenses when it came to shot suppression this year. They were, I believe, 4th when it came to block shots this year. So Talbot was helped out massively with a good defense in front of him. Detroit they were 27th in shot suppression this year. And there's no clear improvement in the defense this year. So Steve, what are we doing here? Improve the defense, please.
Yeah. Don't know, but you also signed Jack Campbell. So now there are 2 Jack Campbells playing professional sports in Detroit. Don't know if that's necessarily the headline you want, but you have it.
Yeah, and Campbell. I mean, that's a AHL signing because someone needs to play backup goalie for Sebastian Kosa in the AHL, but he also signed like 2 other backup goalies as well this offseason. A couple just AHL guys that are really never gonna hit the NHL. And probably gonna put a guy or 2 down in the ECHL as well in Toledo, in the system there. But Tarasenko was probably the only really good signing. I mean, Talbot is an upgrade over having Lyon and Husso basically, and having Lyon be your number 1 goalie. Talbot's going to be that number 1 goalie this year, and what was it, a 2-year, $2.5 million deal, something like that for Talbot?
Yeah, 2-year, $5 million, so yeah, 2.5.
Yeah, so it's not a bad deal. It is an upgrade. It's not a huge upgrade. It's not a needle-moving upgrade. And then same with the Tarasenko signing. It's an upgrade for that second line, but it's not a needle-moving upgrade either. It adds some veteran leadership because, yes, the guy's won 2 cups. He's been alternate captain. I believe he was alternate captain with St. Louis. So he has some leadership skills to him. He's going to help these young guys out, but he's also old. And what is a 4-year, $4.5 million average, something like that?
For
Tarasenko.
He's got 2 years.
Gotcha.
2 years, $9.5 million.
2 years.
So 4.75.
Yeah, 2 years. I mean, slight overpay for him. But it is an upgrade, especially over David Perron, who got paid. I think it was 4 years or 2 years. I can't remember now, but it was $4 million a year in Ottawa. They really fucking overpaid for David Perron there. They really, really overpaid for him.
Yeah, they really wanted the veteran presence there, and I mean, don't get me wrong, David Perron did halfway decent here, but yeah, they paid out the ass for him.
Right, and there's no way I was paying Perron $4 million a year. No fucking way. Tarasenko now, I have no problem paying $4 million. He's I would have paid on a 2 year $8 million contract is what I would have given him personally, but slight overpay is not too bad. But it's a huge, well, not a huge upgrade, but it's an upgrade over Perron, especially when it comes to being on the power play, because that's where Tarasenko's always been good on, was on the power play, and Perron's good on it too, but it's definitely an upgrade there. But it's also an upgrade in terms of 5-on-5 play and also play in the defensive zone. I think Perron, he's good. Well, not good. He's average when it comes to playing in the defensive zone as a forward. Tarasenko's good, so like I said, it is an upgrade. It's just not a needle mover that Detroit really, really needed. But I'm glad. A lot of people, a lot of Detroit fans especially, wanted Stamkos. I was praying to God we wouldn't get him, just because I didn't want to have to sign another aging vet to this roster that needs to get younger. And then as soon as I saw that Nashville was paying $8 million a year for him, I was like, I'm really, really glad we did not get him.
Yeah, I was in the same boat as you. I was all in on Jake Gensel. I would have preferred to have him, but then I saw he signed 7 years for 63 million. That's 9 million a year, so he got more a year than Stamkos did. Which, granted, I think Jake Gensel's more worth it than Steven Stamkos is. He's 29 years old. But you got 7 years of 9 million that's slotted up there. So if it doesn't work out for Tampa, how's that gonna look?
Right, and that's the thing, right? Is Carolina traded away the negotiating rights to Tampa. I don't remember what it was for, but there was just a couple picks. But yeah, Tampa signed him to a, what was it again? 7 year deal.
Yeah, seven
Yeah,
years, $63 million
yeah,
contract.
7 year, $9 million a year average. Um, I mean, look, Gensel's a good player. He's not worth $9 million though.
As I'm saying,
He's not
if I'm
near
the
worth
TV, I'm not paying him
like
$9 million.
I think this is kind of like a last ditch kind of effort um for Tampa Bay, like one last good try before you got to kind of rebuild this team because um yeah, just it's so weird. Pittsburgh, I know, has had a pretty decent offseason. After missing the playoffs for the last 2 years, they want to try and make another crack or two with it, with Crosby and Malkin. But I don't think that franchise is really going to go much anywhere with those two guys getting much, much older. Um, and Washington, this year, who was that goalie that they just signed? I can't remember now, but they upgraded that goalie. They desperately needed it. So Washington's had a pretty decent, um, off season. Then here's my thing. I want to go back to the Cam Talbot thing in Detroit real quick. Is that so? A lot of people are saying that this is a great signing for Detroit. Um, I, it's a okay signing, and here's why. L.A. We just signed him to what again, like $2.5 million a year on a 2 year deal. L.A. just paid double that for another goaltender. Um, and so if Cam Talbot was really all that good, why didn't L.A. sign him for that deal? Um, then paying double for, I think it was Darcy Kemper. Um, so like why are we acting like Cam Talbot's gonna save the franchise in Detroit? Why are we acting like that, Detroit fans? Come on now. Let's use our heads a little bit.
Yeah, he's an aging goalie. He's gonna fill plug a massive hole, but still not the best you could have done.
No, I wanted Allmark or even John Gibson. I wouldn't have mind signing. I mean, he's 1 year younger than Cam Talbot is, but I really wanted us to go out and try and get Allmark. I don't care if it would have cost us number 15 in the draft. I wanted Allmark. That would have actually moved the needle for the Red Wings this year, and that could put Detroit in the playoffs. But Steve Yzerman has not made a single move in the offseason that's actually going to move the needle for Detroit. And in fact, I think Detroit's actually going to take a step backwards because they're bringing in all these rookies this year as well.
Yeah, that's it's pretty possible. So I expect they might be above 500, but it's going to be close. I don't know if they'll make the playoffs again, and it'll be because they'll make their own mistakes like they did last year and come back and bite them in the ass.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Another interesting thing, and this is a team that didn't do anything in the offseason because they literally cannot. Colorado, they came into in a free agency with with $300,000 in cap space. Um, and the thing is they didn't lose anyone because everyone that they have on their roster right now signed a term. Um, so they had no free agents going out, and they cannot bring any free agents in, considering they have $300,000 in cap space. So Colorado has literally done nothing, and they need to retool somehow. But considering their cap situation, I mean, they have the worst cap situation, I think, right now out of every single team. Toronto is definitely up there. Vegas is definitely up there, but I think Colorado just straight up has the worst cap situation right now, just because of the fact that they have all these players signed to term. They have a couple contracts that expire next offseason, but they had none expiring this year, so they kind of had to sit around and do fuck all. I expect them to make some trades here very soon, but they just haven't been able to do anything, especially in free agency, given that they have literally $3,000 in cap space. Or $300,000 in cap space.
So yeah, that's a shitty situation to be in. It's like the Saints in the NFL, just cap hell. It's never a good position to be in. And I mean, for Colorado, they are a good franchise. They, playoff franchise. At some point, these franchises got to start understanding you can't dig yourself into a hole and deal with it later. You got to start planning for the long term and try and make it so you're not tanking all the way to the bottom for 10 years just to make it back up for a 5-year window.
Right. And Colorado, they won a cup with this core, so, mission accomplished already with that. But they put themselves in a position to where they could have long-term success with this core, but it hasn't come through since they won that cup a couple years ago, and another disappointing playoffs and another disappointing offseason for them because they're strapped for cash. And Boston did a really, really good job with their retooling this offseason. Obviously, they had to dump one of their goalies, and that was obviously Allmark, because you can't have two number one goalies making number one goalie money. So that cleared up a ton of cap space for Boston. And they've brought in quite a few guys. They brought in Zadorov, and that's very good for Boston. Zadorov is going to be a huge help for that team on both ends of the ice. He's a very good two-way defenseman. And then the Rangers, they've had a pretty decent offseason. They lost Gustafson, who Detroit did sign. And that is a slight upgrade for Detroit, but it's not a needle-moving move for Detroit. There's a lot of talks that Detroit was gonna, or New York was gonna trade Trouba to Detroit, and that would have moved the needle for Detroit. But I guess Trouba, he has a no trade clause, and Detroit was on that list, and he said, "I'm not going to Detroit." And I mean, that's that. And the thing is too is that most of the time players in the NHL will waive their no trade clause, but I guess his wife has a residency or another year left on her residency at some hospital in New York, so he wants to stay in New York, and he can do that. He's earned the right on that contract to do that. So New York was looking to trade him out to try and clear up some cap space for this free agency, but ultimately, they weren't able to do that, but they did. They signed a couple, back end players, fourth line, third line, and bottom pair defensemen. Kind of help retool them. New York is primed to win a cup right now, and I think going into this offseason, I still think they're my favorite to win the cup this year. Heading into this season now, I guess. But yeah, just a very, very interesting offseason altogether, though. But you got anything else before we get out of here today?
Uh, and say nothing really jumps off the page. I mean, like we said, I mean, outside of like, oh yeah, we should talk about Florida, how they had a lot of people leave.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. They
Brandon
had a
Montour,
yep.
another on their back end, left for Seattle. So that's another demon that they had that I think led to them making it to the cup. Leave for another team.
Oh yeah,
How long Montour signed for, but again, if he signed for more than a year, it's like, well, so what did Florida do to only get? Yeah, he signed a 7-year, $50 million contract, average of 7.14 mil.
yeah. Seattle overpaid for it, like absolutely overpaid for him.
But
And
again,
yeah,
what is Florida doing that people are only signing there for 1 year? And they just won the Stanley Cup, and then they leave that team that just won the Stanley Cup, and they're willing to sign for 7 years. Is it the
I
team in the front office that's doing
yeah.
that?
I
Or
mean,
is it the player that's saying, "I'm not going to play for this team. You're not offering me enough."
I think part of it was in I think Florida, they've actually had a pretty decent offseason. I mean, they did lose a ton off this cup winning roster, but they got a decent amount back. So in terms of just you know not letting the ship sink necessarily. But yet Florida, I mean, they were in a cap situation coming into this past season where they really could only afford to sign guys to a 1 or 2 year deal, and that's what they ended up with. So they were going to lose a ton of guys because if they try to re-sign any of them, they're gonna put themselves into a dangerous cap situation. And that's the thing, right? As Florida has done this right over the past 6, 7, 8 years now, is they've slowly built up this roster. They have a really solid core that signed a term, and they're losing not necessarily core pieces, but they're losing some major pieces that they had this year. But they still have their core, and they still have a pretty decent farm system to get prospects out of and brought up into the NHL. So it's not like Florida's set up for long-term success. It's just a matter of how far is this success actually going to go, and what more can they do? Obviously, they won the cup. Can they win another with this core that they have and the farm system that is bleeding out for them, but is still somewhat full and has some decent prospects, But Florida's done things, I think, very, very well. They've managed their cap very well over the last few years. But again, Seattle, they overpaid for Montour. Toronto's overpaying for Ekman Larson, and I don't blame Florida for letting them walk. If those are the numbers that those guys wanted, let them walk, because that's going to save you a ton of money and let you continue on to long-term success.
That's a very valid way to look at it.
Yeah. So with that said, guys, rate, review, subscribe. Let us know what you guys want to see. We got the MLB All-Star Game coming up. We're in the last month before there's last month of the year with no football. So we're going to get into training camp here in a few weeks. College football ramping up as well. So we definitely have to talk about some college football. There's some interesting stuff in the news lately with college football, and we definitely get to talk about that here soon. We're going to have no episode on Thursday just because, again, there's not a whole lot going on right now. But next Tuesday, we're going to talk a lot of MLB All-Star Game. We're also going to talk, college football and some NFL as well. And then we'll, touch on any NBA or NHL stuff that's happened. But there's probably not going to be a whole lot in the news cycle for the next few weeks there. So with that said, thank you guys so much for listening, and we will see you guys on Tuesday.